So there I am, perusing through my Twitter, being the usual abusive sexual person that I am, and then I noticed something almost mythical, something I had not seen since, well, last year. A video worth responding to. I say worth loosely. If anything, this just affords me an opportunity to mock something and enlist Anna to do it with me. Do you still know how to meme?
No, not really. But there's no doubt in my mind that we can disprove this moron without even trying.
We need to talk about the problem with white feminism.
Why don't we talk about the problems with feminism in general? I personally think that would be a lot more productive, especially since there's so many of them.
What's white feminism?
I will in a moment answer those questions once I have gotten something off my chest in the form of a question. As Al Jazeera funds AJ+, and Al Jazeera is an arm of the government of Qatar, Qatar being a theocratic, patriarchal government, do you really think you, a Scottish lady, fronting AJ+, funded by Al Jazeera, have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to targeting your, quotes, journalism at, and I'm going to charitably name it this, millennials and leftists? Now, to answer your question, what is white feminism? White feminism is like all feminism, except it's white, and of course has privilege and power. Now what?
Although there are different definitions...
Well, of course, there are different definitions. The last thing we want to do with any movement is have a sole definition that would unite the entire group now.
Basically, we're talking about white, cis, able-bodied women not acknowledging the struggles of women of colour, people with disabilities, and LGBT communities.
Are you sure there's still feminists then? Because from what I've learned, many feminists stand behind the notion of supporting equality. What you're explaining to me is that there is a, well, I would argue a radical wing of who are only in it for themselves. Either that or you're just explaining how somehow these women, or white women, are basically straight white men. Deaf to the white race, everyone.
Want an example? How about the actor Gal Gadot?
Last I checked, Gal Gadot was female and therefore an actress. Not that I want to in any way assume her gender, though.
Who constantly talks about feminism and equality.
Isn't that a good thing? A woman calls herself a feminist and talks about equality. Why is that wrong? Oh, yeah, because she's white, rich, and hot as fuck. I'm starting to think this is all a jealousy thing.
She played Wonder Woman and is also a feminist ambassador for Revlon.
And I always feel like there's such misunderstanding about what feminism actually means. For me, it's all about freedom of choice.
But the actor also supports the Israeli army, which oppresses Palestinian women on a daily basis. See the disparity?
You don't suppose the reason she supports the military is because she served in it, do you? Or perhaps because she herself is Israeli with many, many generations of Jewish behind her. And just an FYI, it is widely acknowledged that Jewish is a race. She is therefore, and you can quite clearly see it in the pictures of her, not white.
Yeah, and I also found it interesting that she shames Gal for supporting a cause that oppresses women, but I bet you anything that this girl supports Islam. I've noticed that feminists usually choose Islam over women's rights in the name of tolerance.
This example is terrible. Oh, and it's important to note that the clip you showed of Gal Gadot came from Chris Parenti. The clip is 39 seconds long, and in it, the question was asked about whether or not this was a feminist icon movie and telling the story from that narrative, or trying to have a bit of fun with the character, and Gal Gadot made it quite clear that feminism is a choice, as she said, but she also wanted to have fun with the character and tell her story. I think that's important. I'm not sure why. This might get edited out.
I think white women ignore issues related to women of color because, it doesn't resonate with them. It's not their issue. It's not their concern. They don't experience what we experience, therefore they don't have to deal with it.
I'm sorry, but what issues are you experiencing? The only problems I can think of is black incarceration rates being significantly high. But it's because of all the crime rates in black areas. It's not white people's fault. Your community is never going to get better until you claim responsibility and stop blaming white people.
They don't have to feel our issues and concerns.
This is one of those very odd little cliches that I don't understand. It essentially comes down to the almost minority sass of, you don't know me. Of course I don't. but I've always treated people with a similar level of indifference when it comes to their race, and that has served me well. What I've noticed, and seem to notice quite a lot, is whenever white people try and do something that benefits people of colour, white people get shat on for acting like white knights, or benevolently being racist, or benevolently being sexist. I believe those are the terms typically used. #gentrification is bad, okay?
Western feminists ignoring the struggles of women who aren't white has a real-world impact.
You know, you've actually brought up a really good point. It is one I have regularly touted in my many response videos to internet and bedroom feminists, where they have bleated on, and it didn't matter what race they were. They have bleated on about equality in their country, bleated on about the gender pay gap while not fully understanding it, bleated on about systemic racism while also not entirely understanding it, or the struggles of women trying to get into power because, while you have the opportunity, they want representation without any kind of talent there. They want to skirt meritocracy in favour of representation. So your point about them not talking about the struggles of women around the world, where there has actually been and there is still ongoing issues with sexism, is a good point. So let's see how you expand on that.
For example, let's take the gender pay gap. Women on average make 80 cents for every dollar a man makes. But women of colour have it way worse, especially black women. Black women are paid 63 cents for every dollar paid to a white man.
Must not play shoe clip. This argument has been debunked so many times. I think I'm getting a migraine. Oh, Anna, go make me a sandwich.
In fact, black women in the US face racism in every walk of life. They're more likely to live in poverty, are paid less, and black women are less likely to hold management positions.
Instead of making these very wild assertions to make a very grand point of supposed racism, why not look at the reasons why women are paid less, why it seems to be women of colour, how that information was collected, because that seems to be quite important and yet omitted to make a rather skewed perspective point. Why not look at reasons why more black women live in poverty? For example, environmental, social, cultural differences that arise.
Actually, I think you mean environmental racism.
And also look at why less black women are inclined to get management jobs or be in management positions, whether it be by personal choice, due to a whole myriad of reasons. You are using this to create an argument, a poor argument, for racism. But because you're not showing how you are proving this, it is nothing more than a glorified assertion. It's propaganda at best.
And white women don't seem to be learning their lesson.
Learning their lessons for what? Believing there's sexism affecting women and participating in feminist issues? I mean, I know women are not oppressed in the Western world, but it's just complete lunacy to break it down to privilege and exile certain people who believe in the same cause as you.
The original This Is America video by Childish Gambino tackled serious issues black people are facing in the US, including racism and police brutality.
I know absolutely nothing about hip-hop. In fact, this genre and many genres like it I don't listen to because I'm only interested in the metal. So if you, Anna, know anything about it and can understand the argument this lady's making, go for it.
I'm not very knowledgeable on modern day music either, but from what I researched, there really isn't much of an argument. There's a few hidden messages in the video, though. But the general consensus is that white people love black culture, but often turn their backs on black issues, allegedly. It's honestly exactly what it sounds like, an attempt to reach for victim status.
But Canadian comedian Nicole Arbour completely overlooked that by mocking the oppression and the suffering of black people when she did her parody video.
Don't catch you climbing up. Don't catch you climbing up. 'Cause don't get your hope.
Is this video a parody? Because twice now you've made fundamental errors and you used it to make what could be considered to be legitimate arguments. The first being Gal Gadot, this one being the total misunderstanding of an obvious parody.
Yeah, I believe that's called comedy. Or attempted comedy, at least, with Nicole Arbour.
Granted, Nicole Arbour is not very funny, and is a well-documented abuser, so whenever she argues in favour of equality, I take it on face value as nothing more than bullshit. But you seem to be using this to make some valid point. which I think is a weak point, and it has me curious as to whether or not you're trying to troll me. If you are, you're making a really shit job of it.
The westernised feminism that you've probably heard about has historically been white, like Susan B. Anthony of the suffragette movement. Those suffragettes who we learn about in school tirelessly fought for the white woman's right to vote, even if that meant not giving black men the same rights. I mean, Susan B. Anthony literally said she would cut off her own arm before she let black men vote.
Actually, you misrepresented what she meant. What she actually said was that she personally would not fight for the black man's right to vote, as all of her attention was on women. It doesn't make the quote any less wrong, but obviously it was a different time back then and it was more of everyone for themselves. Also, the whole voting rights argument has been done incorrectly. A lot of people don't know this, but in America, women were allowed to vote before the 19th Amendment was passed, but only if they owned property. It's not based on race, gender, age, or wealth. If you owned property, you were allowed to vote. Rich, white men were not allowed to vote if they didn't own property. So that was my little history lesson of the day.
So going off history, is it time that white feminists started facing up to the fact that they still have privilege and that women of colour face more struggles than they do?
And here we go with blaming other people and not taking any responsibility and all. I'm really sick of this, girl. Just allow people to join your movement no matter what. Do not assign privilege and find commonality with those in your group. Do all these things and you'll find yourself enjoying life much, much more. Do you have any final thoughts?
If we're going to blame ancestors for what people do in current year, then of course we have no leg to stand on anymore. As a society, no one does. And that applies to literally any culture. As far as I'm concerned, the only way to solve this is to vote for Cthulhu and Magog in 2020. No lives matter. Magog's going to put out the collaboration where we shill that. Probably in 2020 because he's a lazy little